Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, my much maligned YouTube channel, which I haven't been posting very regularly to. The last video that I did was my daily vlog a couple of weeks ago, and I would really appreciate if you would check that out, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, write a comment. If you did watch it, then I thank you so much. Thank you for coming back. Welcome back. I was just thinking about what I could do on YouTube, because actually when it comes to YouTube and blogging, I guess I've been feeling a little bit uninspired lately. I've never been the traditional fashion beauty blogger, which, well, I was actually for a period. I did the fashion blog on irishtimes.com, and when I was doing that, it was kind of a lot easier to know what to blog about, obviously, because I was blogging about fashion. And now that I'm a little bit more lifestyle-y, features, opinion, it can be more difficult to come up with ideas and to think of what it is that I really want to write about or that I really want to post about. But as I was thinking about this earlier, I realised that I hadn't done anything on YouTube about the referendum. I haven't talked that much about repeal in any, I suppose, permanent forms. I did do a blog post about a year ago, why I'm pro-choice, and that's on my blog. I'll link it below. But I hadn't done anything on YouTube talking about the referendum, and with just under 2 weeks to go, it seemed like a really good time to have a little bit of a chat about. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, relax, and listen to me talk about the Irish referendum on the 8th Amendment and why I will be voting yes and what I think about it. This is not necessarily my attempt to convert anyone, so I just want to say that right now. I was just talking to my friend about it and saying I'm about to shoot a YouTube video, and she was like, well, why aren't you wearing your repeal jumper? I feel as though the repeal jumper has become really synonymous with a campaign, with an activism that is so important, and I'm so glad it exists, but I didn't want this to be another video of somebody wearing a repeal jumper and going, you have to vote yes. Because I'm not trying to convert anyone. In an ideal world, I would love to think that I could, but I guess this video is more for people who may be undecided or on the fence, who are registered to vote, who are going to vote on May 25th, and who just aren't sure which way they're going to vote. Let's have a little chat about the 8th Amendment, what it is, and what the referendum is proposing that we change about it. Currently, there's an amendment in our constitution that talks about the termination of pregnancy. And ours is the only constitution, aside from, I think it's the Philippines, in which termination of pregnancy or reproductive rights are actually enshrined in the constitution. The 8th Amendment essentially says that the life of the unborn, so the life of the fetus, is equal in value to the life of the woman. There are conditions in our current constitution that allow for termination when there is a very real and tangible risk to the health of the woman, including a risk of suicide. So in theory, if a woman goes to a hospital and says, I really cannot go through with this pregnancy, I am suicidal, in theory, if she genuinely is suicidal, she should be allowed to have a termination. But I think we can all see how that would be very problematic in terms of who decides who's actually suicidal. Do we believe the woman when she comes and says, I cannot go through with this pregnancy because I think I may commit suicide? Or are we theoretically skeptical of women who might say that? I mean, it's kind of sick to even be asking that question, like, do we believe women? That's a very current question. But I was listening to a radio ad today by REFCOM, which is the Referendum Commission, which strives to give unbiased information about the referendum, because we're all entitled to get information about the referendum that is unbiased. I mean, we have an obligation to educate ourselves as well, but we are also entitled to get information that's unbiased, and that is coming from the Referendum Commission. But the radio ad that I heard today essentially said that in the 8th Amendment of our Constitution, there is a provision for termination of pregnancy where there is a real and tangible risk to the life of the woman. But I think that we all see how, say, the suicide issue would be problematic, and also then there are situations like Savita Halappanavar died in hospital in Galway a couple of years ago because she was told she was having a miscarriage, the fetus was not going to survive, and she asked for a termination, but because they could detect a heartbeat under Irish Constitution, no doctor, as far as I can gather, in Galway wanted to make the decision to terminate that pregnancy because they felt like it would be against the law. She went into a state of sepsis. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, and I will link some articles below that kind of give more background and more detail into this, but essentially she was denied a termination and she died. And there are so many cases in which the 8th Amendment has made life for women incredibly difficult, even within the conditions in the amendment that allow for termination. So say there was another case a couple of years ago where there was a woman who was a non-national, for want of a less gross term, who was a victim of rape, became pregnant and wanted to terminate her pregnancy, but because she couldn't travel to the UK to terminate her pregnancy. She said she was suicidal. I think she wasn't believed. There was another situation where there was a teenager. She wanted to travel to the UK, which we do allow people to do because we're perfectly happy to export our problems, but because she was a ward of the state, she was not allowed to travel. And as far as I remember, she was detained. I think she was force fed, and then she was there was a forced cesarean performed because they wouldn't allow her to have a termination. Some other situations I think that people tend to be very sympathetic towards are rape, incest, and cases of fatal fetal abnormality where the fetus is either not going to survive outside the womb or is going to have a really terrible quality of life, will survive for a very short period of time, and we don't allow for terminations in those situations. So people who, for example, at 6 months go for a scan and find out that their child is not going to survive outside the womb are forced to travel to the UK. So they take a flight, they go to Liverpool, they go to Manchester, they have their termination there and they have to fly back in pain and also heartbroken. And that's one of the things actually that I wanted to address, is that whenever you talk about termination, you talk about being pro-choice, people say things like, well, you know, how long do you think people should be allowed to have abortions? Do you think they should be allowed to have abortions up to 6 months or up to 8 months? Like, do you think that's okay? And the fact of the matter is that in countries where abortion is free, safe and legal, the time at which people have abortions is much, much sooner, statistically. So Irish women who travel for terminations have their terminations much later than women living in countries where terminations are legal, because essentially we have to book time off work, we have to book flights, we have to pay to get there, we have to take the time. It's made much more difficult, and that often means that it happens much, much later. One of the other things is that in cases which are very, very rare, like the vast majority of abortions, the vast majority of terminations are performed before 12 weeks. But in the cases where terminations are performed late, the vast majority of those are on babies who are very, very much wanted, and they've discovered that there's something really wrong with their pregnancy. They've discovered that either they won't survive or the child won't survive, and this is a child that they really, really wanted. And I don't understand why we are punishing these people, these individuals, these couples, for having to make like a really, really tough decision, for making a really tough decision and then having to go abroad to do it. And it also adds this kind of stigma where, since we've started talking about the Eighth Amendment, since we started talking about the referendum, so many people have come out and said, you know, I had a termination, but I never spoke about it, because there's this stigma, there's this taboo, because it's illegal, it feels somehow morally and ethically wrong. And when it comes to morals and ethics, one of my big issues with some cohort of the no side, when they say things like they agree with termination, but only in specific circumstances, so only where maybe there's been rape, there's been incest, there's a fatal fetal abnormality, and they say, you know what, abortions in those situations are okay, but if it's a woman who just doesn't want the baby, then I'm not really okay with that. And what I would say is, if you're somebody who thinks that abortion in rape is okay, but abortion the rest of the time isn't okay because it quote unquote stops a beating heart, or you feel like every potential life deserves a right to be born. That always reminds me of that line in Juno when she's going to the abortion clinic and the girl goes, all babies deserve to be born. But if you're somebody who thinks that rape and incest are okay circumstances for abortion, but that just because you don't want to have kids, just because you didn't mean this to happen, just because you're not at the right period of your life, that isn't an okay reason, then I would ask you, who are you policing, or who are you protecting? Because on the one hand, you might say that you're protecting the baby. If you're protecting the baby, then what about the fetus that's conceived of rape? Because that's no less a life, by your logic, than the fetus that's conceived of consensual sex between two adults. And I think that a lot of the time when we say that we're uncomfortable with the idea of abortion for quote unquote no reason, it's because we really just are not comfortable with women feeling like they can have sex and they can be promiscuous, which, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way, but that, I guess that's just the way of saying that people have sex when they want to have sex and not because they're in a loving, caring relationship with one person. And I think it's really, really important to examine our motivations and to examine our own ideas around what is termed acceptable behaviour and what are termed acceptable choices for women. And what I would ask ultimately is, if you are going to vote no, are you happy with the way things are right now? Because voting no means that you don't want to change anything in the Constitution and you're happy for things to stay the exact same as they are right now. And right now, I think it's 9 women travel to the UK every single day to terminate their pregnancies. The Eighth Amendment does not prevent abortion. What it does is it makes abortion more difficult. It punishes women for their decisions and often for their circumstances. It punishes couples who have really wanted to have a child and then discover that this child is not compatible with life and they don't want to continue with a pregnancy that is not going to result in the healthy, happy baby that they wanted. It punishes victims of rape. It punishes victims of incest. And it punishes people in very low socioeconomic brackets who cannot afford to go to the UK. People who can't afford to take time off work. People who can't afford to pay for flights. It also means that people who are not Irish citizens or who are awaiting the results of their refugee application, they can't go because they can't leave the country. So they can't avail of terminations in the UK. They're actively being discriminated against by our constitution. I mean, aside from the fact that they're in direct provision, which is another horrific thing that we do to them. I'm voting yes on May 25th, not because I think everybody should have an abortion, but because I think everybody should have a choice. And if you wouldn't force a woman to go through with a pregnancy simply because she committed the sin of having sex, then you are somebody who wants to vote yes as well. And that's basically it. I don't want to sound preachy about it, and I don't want to sound prescriptive because I know that there are loads of nuances about this, but currently we do not have a country where no abortions take place. I mean, no abortions take place in our country, but we have citizens who have terminations. There are plenty of Irish women who have had terminations and who will go on to have terminations. They won't have them at home. They won't have them in a health system with health practitioners they know and trust. They won't have the support of their families and friends. They won't have the support of their GPs. They won't feel safe and supported, and they will feel like they're doing something wrong and they're stigmatized because our country discriminates against women who have sex. And that might sound like a gross simplification of a very complex problem, and in a way it is. But I think if you look at our history, you can see that our country, we have a legacy of punishing women. And unless we all get out and we vote to change the Constitution and we vote to take women's reproductive rights out of the Constitution, they should not be written in law. A woman's reproductive health should be between her doctor, and in some circumstances her partner. But honestly, I think what a woman does with her body, what a woman does with her reproductive organs, and whether or not a woman continues with her pregnancy is her choice and her choice alone. And for that choice to be enshrined and limited by our Constitution just feels so incredibly backwards. There's so much about being Irish that really embarrasses me. The Eighth Amendment is one thing, Irish celebrities are another thing, but there's also so much about being Irish that I'm proud of. And I'm proud of how we can laugh at ourselves. I'm proud of our sense of humour. I'm proud of how hospitable we are. I'm proud of our reputation worldwide. But I honestly don't know how proud I will be on May 26th or May 27th if we find out that we voted no simply because we think that the potential life of a child is more important than the life of a woman. So that's my Eighth Amendment manifesto. The referendum is on May 25th. I really hope you'll go out and vote if you're registered. I hope we're going to be celebrating in some way a landmark day for Irish women and for our future and for the future of our children and our daughters and the girls who are going to come after us, because I guess we can only hope that we're making the world better, even though I fear that in a lot of ways we're making it worse. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please do. There's a subscribe button below. I don't post that often, so you won't be spammed with any voracious posting rate. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video or you didn't like what I'm saying, feel free to give it a thumbs down, but also please let me know why. Let me know what you didn't like, let me know what you disagree with, and let's hash it out in the comments, because I'm sure there's so much that I didn't touch on and that I didn't address, and I would love to do so with you at a later date. Like I said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you all soon. Bye!